nine, but so I think we'll open today's proceedings, and for the 23rd of March 2021. You want to be 40 seconds in front. And first of all, are there any apologies? And we just have the one from Robin Sinclair. So do I have a mover? John, seconded Martin. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. And so it gives me great pleasure to welcome Maura Coatesworth to talk about Thames-Coromandel Kiwi Care. You do an amazing job.
Thank you. Me Gowdy, councillors, tēnā koutou katoa. I come on behalf of Thames Coast Kiwi Care to bring you an update, a request and an invitation. So firstly, to update you, Thames Coast Kiwi Care has been going now for 15 years. And we have actually had an extraordinary conservation result. So the big picture is that predators are still driving kiwi to extinction. Here in the Coromandel, on the southern Coromandel, all kiwi that were in unmanaged populations have gone silent. So there are two remaining populations, that's us up at Tamata and Tapu, and Whenua on the east. So apart from that, there are no kiwi that are heard in surveys because of the predators. So in that context, I think both Kiwi Care and Whenua have done some outstanding work. So nationwide, the aim is that there will be a 2% increase in kiwi. We've produced something like a 20% annual increase in Kiwi Care. So we started with a population that was on the verge of killing. There were estimated in surveys to be about 28 birds. And we now know from surveys that are done every year that we've got over 100 birds up in the Tamata area. In addition to that, we've used Operation Nest Egg and we've bred another 80 birds. We've got 30 of our kiwi, and they're on two predator-free islands. So we've got 30 of our young kiwi have gone to Motutapu Island. Once Motutapu is fully stocked, those kiwi are coming back to the Coromandel. So it's a Coromandel-wide initiative called To the Motu and Back. And so it's really exciting. In a couple of years, when they're fully stocked, the progeny will be coming back to restock and expand kiwi populations all around the Coromandel, working together. For us locally, we've got 18 birds on Rotorua Island. We take eggs from transmitted birds, hatch them at Auckland Zoo, take them to Rotorua where they can grow into healthy, feisty kiwi and not be killed by stoats, because young kiwi can't fend off stoats. So this year we're bringing back, in May, we're doing a muster and we're hoping to bring back most of those 18 birds for release up in the Tamata area. It's actually a pretty amazing and significant result nationally for conservation to have those kind of statistics, and it's all due to our volunteers. And can I acknowledge the whānau of Sally and Martin, who are both trapping families. We've got over 50 volunteer trappers who trap over 100 kilometres of trap lines 16 times a year. So it's an extraordinary small community effort, you know, the little train that could. That's what this group has been. So that's the really good news. And I think for somewhere like the council to think about, are Kiwi going to be part of our local identity and our story that we need to be profiling? Certainly I know Tourism Coromandel is looking at using the Kiwi as a hero that will be part of promotion and what people love about the Coromandel as our wild places. So that's the really good news. I also come today with a concern and a request for you as council. We participated in the council's pre-consultation survey on the biodiversity strategy and offered to be a case study when you did the review. Rachel Poole wrote back and informed us that you may actually just revoke the strategy. And I'm here to ask that in the context of the crisis, really, the situation there is for our wilderness and how important the Coromandel Peninsula is, that you don't just revoke the strategy. This is something that needs shared leadership from all of us, from all of the agencies, and especially TCDC as our elected representatives on the Coromandel. So I'm really asking you to consider working together with other agencies and providing your leadership in this area. and that as part of that you do a full and meaningful review that includes groups like ours. So that's Thames Coast Kiwi Care's request to you. And finally, I bring an invitation. We're really excited that we're going to be mustering our young Kiwi in May, and this is one of our beautiful birds. And this year, it's 15 years worth of work, and so we're, instead of having a fundraising dinner, we're going to invite the business community of Thames up to an event. The first night's usually the sort of best night for a muster, so the next day on Saturday, May the 8th, we expect to be bringing back significant number of young Kiwi, and we're hosting the business community from 4 to 6 when the Kiwi will be coming. They'll be able to be seen. People find seeing a wild Kiwi just before it's released a pretty special experience. So, Mayor Gowdy, we hope that you would like to attend.
I saw the 5-kilogram one, which is one of the biggest you've ever had, that was brought into the wall.
Right.
I don't know if you were there that night. Actually.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So they, unless, I don't know if you've come more than once, it might have been when I was in Australia, but they, so if a couple of councillors and you would like to come, we'd love to have you, and then the Kiwi will go up and be released into the bush of tomato. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I actually have a question for you.
Yeah.
I saw on a rural program, television program, that the huge effort they're putting into controlling hedgehogs. They've estimated the decimation of flying hedgehogs is huge for the areas and species that they want to protect. This was particularly in the South Island. Yeah, well, we do catch hedgehogs, and Doc's got video of a hedgehog actually. I've seen the video of a hedgehog climbing a tree to predate the eggs in a nest. So the kind of cute little children's storybook picture of a hedgehog belongs in England and not here in Coromandel. Climbing a tree with a hedgehog, that's no mean feat. One thing that did cross my mind is that to capture that Kiwi thing, I just wonder if Morrisville has its cows. Yeah. So I just wondered if we couldn't actually adopt hatchling inside a half-broken egg in the cutesy cartoon form as a spot cure of the Kiwi somewhere. Yeah. And we have these things dotted all around the peninsula, so you at the same time create a game. Yeah. Especially if they're trapped in the queues of traffic in our one-way bridges. Yeah. It's a really it's a really good idea. I mean, one thing I didn't mention that's happening Coromandel-wide is we got jobs for, I think we might be the only area in the country we put in collectively for some jobs for nature funding, and there's over 1 million coming. And so the 6 main Kiwi groups are getting together and working with Jude Hooson from Predator Free Hauraki, and we're looking at absolutely ensuring every trap's working properly, and then when we know everything we're doing is really best practice, then we're moving into look at where can we expand. So there's going to be a kind of really lifting up and a cooperative approach to Kiwi protection, and that'll be timed with these Kiwis starting to come back from Watertapu. So I think whatever we do. What about a game? Yeah, a game. Spot. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Billboard thing. Yeah. And we have a number of them throughout the district. Yeah. And at the end of it, if they have a little booklet or they can pick up a pamphlet to fill in where they all are, they get a little something. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. The other thing is Whakatane has a beautiful bronze sculpture right in there downtown. You feel when you go in there that it's part of the identity of this place. And, what better place than Coromandel to have the Kiwi as our future identity? Yeah, mining might be the past heritage, but biodiversity is our future. It's what everyone loves when they come here. We're trying to come up with someone at least cost, at no cost. Yeah. Good. Thank you so much. Are there any other potential questions or comments for it? No, thank you very much. More appreciate it. You'll leave a pamphlet? There's pamphlets for each of you, and I've got 2 or 3 of you would like to come. There's the invitation. Do you want it on our media platforms or not? Well, we can, but the thing about the invitation is there's very strict rules about how many people can be around Kiwi, so it can't be an open event. Thanks. Oh, that's right. That's okay. Right, excellent, thank you. So do I have a mover and a seconder for the public forum, please? Mover?
Yep.
John, Martin, seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Okay, not any items not on the agenda? There being none, any conflicts of interest?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just note on the EPS about 10 o'clock till
As one. Minutes for confirmation, we'll now go into that. So the first one is the Coromandel Tribal Community Board. So do I have a mover?
I'll move that.
John, seconder. Terry, any discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Mercury Bay Community Board minutes. I just moved, Tony seconded, Mary, just want to point out the rather convoluted way that item 2 was written up, but anyway.
I got a,
Any discussion?
yeah, just one to Tony. You say you went to the Waikato Regional Council's catchment meeting discussion. How did that go on? Because it was obviously stopped and.
It was excellent.
They're looking at regenerating, are they?
Absolutely, and they're taking it away from, I was going to use that for minutes.
Well, we can do that in members' reports.
But yeah, no, very good, and I'll catch up. I'm not here in minutes.
Any other comments around the minutes? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Tribal Pawanui, do I have a mover? Terry, seconder.
Yep.
John, any discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thames Community Board minutes. Do I have a mover? Sarah?
Yes.
Martin?
I'll see.
And any discussion? Oh, sorry, Terry.
No.
I'll put your head just
No.
Just, can I just ask a question around the subcommittee? Who else is on the subcommittee apart from Strat and Peter Riddle?
I think there'll be professional staff leading it. It's
That's
purely,
what I'm just making sure.
yeah, my understanding is a formal tender process and they, is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
It's basically, it's a formal information sharing exercise led by staff, really.
Yeah.
That would be the best way to describe it.
Yeah, there's no way they're going to do that. Yeah.
Okay, all good, very good. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
of that. So, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Whakatane Community Board minutes.
So moved.
Terry Williams, seconder.
Yep.
Sorry, John. Sorry, Martin.
I just had
Do you think we should still be croquet?
something in my brain. It's reported in here that you made a comment, but you're not listed as being at the meeting.
What?
Is that the one you mentioned?
We want to. What are you talking about now?
I saw somewhere in the minutes, I had the feeling it was the Whangamata one, it was a meeting you had gone along to, and you made a comment, but you weren't listed as being present. Maybe it wasn't the Whangamata one.
It was, we will make a change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Being so thorough.
Good on you.
Not even.
So, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Audit and Risk Committee minutes, do I have a mover? Sally, Red Murray, seconded Sally. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Actually, Gary, you just break at any time.
I forgot I had my microphone off to do the seconding, but that's all right, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
I'll take it off again just for the moment, okay?
Thank you. Emergency Management Committee minutes.
I'll move.
Red Sally, seconded Terry. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thames-Coromandel District Council minutes, do I have a mover?
I'll move those.
John, seconded.
I'll second.
Thank you, Sally. And any discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. So now we move to the revocation, page 67. which is the revocation of the property strategy. And welcome. Thank you, Rachel. Anything that particularly you wanted to raise?
Just that this strategy does turn up when we do an internet search for it. So having a council resolution really helps tidy up should the public question the result of this strategy in the future.
Right, okay. So are there any, is there any discussion?
One question,
Yes.
over the property strategy, there was quite a timeline chart that was prepared for when you want sale of land. Is that being reproduced in any other area? You say it's moved into other actual areas now?
I wouldn't say there's any document in any of the asset management plans or reserve management plans, which is the main way we do this. So we probably don't have that exact diagram elsewhere. But we would follow best practice if we chose to get rid of any land, which would involve a very similar process.
It's a robust process for the sale of any property. Yes, we have to make sure that we do it correctly. Yeah,
Well, we've got an issue now, some land we didn't recently develop.
sorry?
Some land that's on the card that was given away for $100,000 was removed on the land is now being challenged, saying the process is wrong. It's with the lawyers anyway, so.
Right, okay. So we can't comment about that.
So I just wondering if that process is still there.
Well, the process would exist regardless of whether or not the strategy does.
So, Ed, do I have a mover? Seconded, moved, Tony, seconded, Murray. Any further discussion? Gary, have you got anything that you wanted to comment on? There being none?
Oh, no, thank you. I'm just getting my microphone off. I put it on and off. Okay, thank you.
All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Now to the revocation of governance and strategy policies. So, it's interesting, isn't it? It's quite interesting. Okay, so we welcome
Brian.
Brian. Hello, Sally.
Yeah. Catching up to speed on this report.
Is there any comment that you wanted to make?
No, I think I'm sitting here because 4 of those 7 are regulatory-based ones, and those ones are things that potentially should have been revoked when we put in our general enforcement policy a few years ago. And so we're just tidying up. I assume, having looked at those 3, they'll be done the same thing. Staff have looked at those and said they're no longer needed.
Okay. So, any discussion? Do I have a mover?
I'll make the move.
Tony, do I have a seconder? No? Any discussion? There being none, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say that aye. Yes, carried. Thank you, Brian. Excellent. Destination Coromandel trustee appointments. And so that seems to be ticking along. Is there anyone speaking to that? Thank you. Murray's happy to move it. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to see.
Seconded, John. Is there any discussion? Any matters you wanted to raise, Lorna?
No, just procedural. I guess you've been in touch with Hauraki. They are going through the same with their council, just about the process of the
Hauraki, you're happy to continue?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Gary, is there any comment you wanted to make?
Run back and turn the thing off. No, there isn't, thank you.
Rightio, thank you, Terry.
I'm just looking at these 2 resitting again for another 3 years. Is Destination Coromandel happy with their performance and what they're contributing?
They seem to be. So, and as elected members, because this is your time to have that discussion as well, because you pay for Destination Coromandel. They do come present every quarter, just about how they're progressing. So. If there is anything in terms of, concerns that hasn't been raised with us, nor Hauraki.
So Hauraki have already been through the process and they're happy to approve continuation. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if this is particularly relevant, but just about the performance. I know there's certainly a level of disquiet at the moment in Thames around the eyesight, around the level of service and hours that's open, but
That's a separate issue because Destination Coromandel manage the eyesights, and as you're aware, this is part of the long-term plan consultation around the viability of eyesights. We are in discussions with Destination Coromandel because if they're not doing the hours that are in the service level agreement, then that's something that we have to talk about within their contract agreement. And as you know, we've been talking to the board just to, there are some other issues behind that.
indeed.
Thank you. Right, sorry, Murray.
I was just going to make a point, Your Worship. I question the funding of Destination Coromandel in this workshop in here, and if you say within 48 hours of that workshop, I'd had a phone call from one of the trustees and was invited to one of their meetings with some quite robust discussions were had. And I think if anyone doubts the trustees voted 5 days, they should have been in those discussions.
That's great. Well, we really appreciate that you did that, and I think it's it's great. It's good for us. So thank you. Excellent. Okay, if that's the case, I'll move the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Then it's carried. We appoint a district licensing committee. Do I have a move? Seconder?
Yep.
So John, any discussion? So I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Right.
Against? Carried.
Thank you, Brian.
Oh, thank you. It's not really, actually, it's not really our work. This is an independent process.
Yeah.
So we're now on to the Waikato Local Authority Shared Services half-yearly report. Thank you, Donna.
Morning, everybody. I'll take the report as read. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has. And myself or Rod should be able to help out with those.
I thought we might go through it page by page.
No.
So, I just had some queries around, during the report it talks about being jointly owned by 12 councils. But then scattered through the report, there'll be, under a particular thing, it'll be saying, you know, with the 7 councils that are involved in this, or the 8 councils involved. So, but with no list of who is or isn't.
Yeah.
So to me, it was difficult to get a grasp on which parts of this
We're involved in.
that we're not involved in. And I just wondered if there was opportunities that we weren't taking up or that we were, but it's hard.
Yeah, so there is, with all the different opportunities they have, it's obviously each council can opt in or opt out of it as it goes through. So some councils, you know, take it up, some councils don't. I could probably bring you back a list of the things that we have, that we are involved in, if that would help.
And how does that, when you say when councils opt in or opt out, how is that decided?
It's just, it's through the funding, so they could.
Can I give you an example? 11 councils in the region have got together to look at this water, the 3 waters changes. And so they're using some of the information from LAS, but they've all contributed funding towards this pool of 11 councils exploring the whole agenda item around 3 waters. It's a little bit of a, we kept out of it on the eastern side. It's Meremaru, Hauraki, South Waikato and ourselves didn't contribute because we can't see that the money's actually going to be achieving anything, but they did, and they used some of the resources within Waikato LAS, but they contribute the money to do it.
Okay, so is but at what, I mean, does that come to council to decide if we're contributing, or is that management?
They did that themselves. They actually didn't come to us about that.
No, sorry, I mean, how do we get to decide if we're involved in?
It's a blend. So Waikato LAS also assists the mayoral forum in terms of developing mayoral forum projects. So where there is more high-level strategic projects that would have political The Mayoral Forum asks LAS to get involved and run projects in relation to those higher level things, so such as housing is one area where LAS is currently looking into gathering information to make recommendations back through the Mayoral Forum to their respective councils. The housing initiative is another area where the Mayoral Forum has asked LAS to look at the housing issues across the region and provide good data back to the Mayoral Forum, again, or filtering through to the various councils. So there are a sort of a strategic level of projects that LAS gets involved with, but then there's an operational level. So LAS was primarily set up as a back office company for chief executives to work together to share a resource, to investigate things in a research and development type hub, to identify where savings could be made. And still to this day, after 15 years with LAS, the insurance collaboration that we have still saves the vast amount of money that LAS has achieved. However, working together, we do identify different schemes that we can collaborate on as a back office type of exercise. You'll notice from the statement of intent, this is part of this item, isn't it? The statement of intent, or is that? Yeah. So you'll notice in the statement of intent, the chair of LAS has provided quite a robust message, let's say, in terms of the way LAS has been succeeding. And I fully support that robust message, because a couple of years ago, LAS, with the support of the councils through its SOIs, decided that we were going to get far more active in terms of trying to achieve some real change to offer the opportunities.
Yep.
And there are elements of that change that ultimately will become political, and ultimately our own councils around the Waikato will need to make some decisions. So that chairman's message was put forward as a challenge to chief executives to say, don't shy away from things that are going to cause issues. Let's look at the business cases, provide robust information that we can then present to our councils and make those decisions. So in terms of the decision-making framework that you refer to, we basically have a very broad brush assessment that is called a scoping assessment, and it says, hey, there is a potential opportunity here, let's look at it in more detail. So that's sort of stage one. Stage two is then the development of a detailed business case, which costs obviously a lot more because you've got to delve into things with a lot more detail, and it's got to be a lot more robust. And at the end of that stage two is where the opportunity is offered to different local authorities to either opt in or opt out at that point in time. And if they opt in, therefore, they then fund the progression of that detailed business case to an implementation, or if they opt out, that's where those costs stop for those individual local authorities. Some of those decisions will be based on political decisions because chief executives will have discussed those issues with their elected members, and some of those decisions may be just been debated by the chief executives because they are very purely operational things, such as bulk purchasing of a particular item or a collaboration of an enforcement team, that sort of thing. So it's sort of horses for courses, but that's basically the way the LAS functions. If that helps, I don't know if that helped in terms of it.
Yeah, I agree with Rob too. The last time it looked very visionary what they were doing, now they're doing actual things, and I think it's really good to see and hear some actual activity going on around process and technology and R&D and those things that the councils can capture and help us with our own bureaucracy. So I thought it was a step forward anyway.
As long as it does, it's not just clipping the ticket to fund someone to write yet another report.
No, some of them look quite positive what they were doing.
One thing I've been sort of pushing through the LAS board in recent times, in the last 12 months or so, is that local government under the Local Government Act is tasked with producing Section 17A reviews of the activities that we actually undertake. And you'll probably know around this table that we've done Section 17 reviews on our solid waste activity and our Three Waters activity. I think we did one. So, okay, and our PACS contract, we produced Section 17A reviews. Now, sort of, I suppose it's a bit of a grey area in terms of how far we have to extend that Section 17A review, but that's one of the areas that I've been pushing LAS more and more towards, is to say, well, look, let's get real about doing these Section 17A reviews and give the certainty to LAS that they can be the body that does a Section 17A review and looks at it from a regional perspective and then tears it down to local authorities in terms of what the best decisions could be for any of our activities. Again, that's where we will rub up against political decision making as well as chief executive decision making. But as long as LAS provides the robust information in an environment where shared cost produces the best information and actually gives the full range of opportunities, then I believe that LAS will be functioning both in a very professional way, but also in a protected space that we're not going to get ourselves offside with the individual TLAs as we get that work done. Again, hopefully I'm making sense in terms of what we're doing, but I think that Section 17A review is a real legislative lever to demonstrate that LAS has a mandate for in-line legislation rather than just we make it up as we go along as a company.
Any further questions? There being none, did I have a move in a second? Do I have a mover? Terry, seconder, Sally? Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We now move to page 113 for the Local Government Funding Agency half year report. And, the draft statement of intent, we covered that within there, didn't we? Yes. Sorry, so we go to page
113, that's the funding.
Local government.
Yeah.
After that, sorry, okay. Funding agency. Page 113.
So again, I'll take the report as read. Just as also in regards to this and obviously the Waikato LAS one, this is an opportunity for council to provide feedback to their statement of intent if you so wish to. So I'll take this report as read. It's very similar to LAS and this is their half yearly report and also the draft statement of intent.
So are there any questions for Donna around this one? Everybody's pretty comfortable with it? Anything for the backbenchers? No, we're all good. Any drawing remover?
I'll move.
Tony, seconder? John? Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Yes, carried. So we now go to page 162 for the December budget revision. So we have a comprehensive budget revision report.
So from my perspective, Your Worship, this is where we give you the good news. We're forecasting where we're going to be ending up at year end. It's a December budget revision, so that's where we were sort of halfway through the year. The positive news through this budget revision is that we are going to come out with more of a better performing figure than we budgeted for, which is always a positive situation. So I think this budget review indicates that we will end up about $1 million better off than we predicted at the beginning of the year. So you'll notice, and we'll come to my CE report later, that in January this year we've got a $4 million surplus. However, $3 million of that will be taken up with works from a phasing perspective. So this sort of budget revision gives reassurance that we are heading in a very good direction, and it sort of supersedes the CE's report to a certain degree. Again, it's positive news.
Yeah, Terry, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and we'll be doing another, second budget revision in April. So we'll have 9 months of actuals, more information, and we'll be able to give even a better indication. Yeah, it's good news. So.
Great.
Yeah, we want to have a close as accuracy year end as we can, because that also informs our opening position of our long-term plan. So hence we're doing the second revision.
Thank you very much for all your hard work, because I know it's a lot of hard work involved. Martin, any questions?
Yes, I just had a question, page 165 of the agenda under commentary on significant movements, district universal water metering. So how much do we get from that free water? Was that
4 million? I've only got the first two.
4.8.
Okay, so this, the 2.4 approved is just what we've got so far?
That's the first part, the second part I believe is it.
And then we're forecasting to spend 1.2
Yeah, so that's a timing issue of getting the meters. So
Right.
yeah, it looks like we won't be able to spend all of the 2.4 in this year.
Right.
So that program's going to stretch out.
So,
Sorry, Mary.
no, I was going to say that's a capital expenditure item.
Yeah.
So from the perspective of capital expenditure, I had a meeting yesterday with Andrew, so to sort of update, again, it's sort of a combination of the Chief Executive's report and this report. We're looking at tracking between 80 and 85% on our capital budget at the moment. So the original annual plan capital budget was about 31 million. We're looking at actually spending about 30 to 31 million this year, but on top of that, we've added about $7 million with the additional funding that we've had through Wakatahi and through the water metering, the government subsidy type of stuff in the Three Waters. So whilst our renewed annual plan budget is about 38 million, it looks as though we're tracking to achieve between 30 and 31 million, which is pretty good result, bearing in mind lockdowns and things like that keep occurring. And also ordering these things from overseas when we've had the issues with the ports, which actually the knock-on effect of that is it sends us to a capital program next year of probably $48 to $50 million. The good news in that item is that because we've got certain things now locked into far bigger contracts and we've got bigger contracts delivering those things, I don't actually have any anxiety of delivering the substantial portion of that capital program next year. So we're looking way forward into next year and the year beyond in terms of having that, whilst you try and achieve things in individual years, it actually becomes more of a rolling program over a 2 or 3 year period.
However, the delay in putting water meters in the ground will delay that whole process of us checking for leakage and then getting people used to paying the true cost of what their water is. So that process is.
So we're focused on getting Whitianga in place. Whangamata may be a little delayed from that perspective. I think we were aiming for. Sorry, what was the date we were aiming for Whangamata to start?
That will probably wait until next year.
January 2022.
Yeah, probably early.
Have you ordered all of it?
We've ordered all the meters.
But both?
No, not for both, for the Whitianga stuff. Probably that's where we're at. We've got to do it in stages. And there's options of high demand for these type of things at the moment.
Why would you order them all one go?
So we've just got to make sure we've got enough money. If we order all the meters at the moment for both townships, and we've got enough money to do the install. So we've got to make sure we've got ourselves covered. So the 4.8 is probably not going to cover.
We're forecasting to spend 1.2 million, you get 2.4.
Yeah, so the challenge with that, and the reason why we're not looking to spend 2.4 is the 16 to 20 week delay on the meters at the moment. So that delay will come down in time, I'm sure. But at the moment, as Rob mentioned, the ports and the COVID lockdowns and stuff, that's got a delay on us. So we can't actually.
And the huge demand is.
That's what I say, there's huge demand for people also.
Yeah, but you wouldn't get the bigger order in. If you only get part of it, you would use it. Seems logical if you're going to order from overseas. Yeah, so it's a total number. So
I'm sure they know what they're doing. I'll volunteer.
We need to manage with option code.
So, okay, so we'll, done?
Are we comfortable with that?
Barry, would you?
Basically, the risk of ordering all of the meters is we have to pay for all of the meters. The risk then is that we may overspend the overall budget, and because it's a government-funded exercise, we don't want to order everything and then end up not being able to put them in because we haven't got the funds available to be able to put them in. That's the key, is it was breaking it down into sufficient chunks to know that once they arrive, we can actually, we have the remaining budget to be able to put them in. That's what Bruce is referring to. So in terms of getting that time lag into the system, we will have the time frame that we know when to order the meters with any delays of getting them through the port to be able to then deliver the funding tower. But we'll know that we won't grow any budget from a rate perspective.
And presumably it's not like some other government, some ones where there's not like a very tight time frame or anything like that.
We've been given extra time for this one,
Right.
which is good. Because originally it was going to be all in the same year, but that's been extended out now for 2 years.
So they're actually realising the reality of the situation around.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Which is always good.
We all know
Because it's a nationwide thing. I mean, what we're doing, everybody else is scrambling around to do too.
So it's a nationwide thing and it's all happening all at once, suddenly they're getting it.
This is slightly related question. So are other councils using that money to put meters in?
Yes, I'm going to share some others are. I mean, there's a range of projects. Some of them are meters, some of them are upgrades. Yeah, there's lots of different. There's definitely a high demand for meters at the moment.
Right, so do any further questions?
Just one thing, Sandra, it's not just that there are a number of facts given out around this table from time to time. A big thank you, Rob and staff, for this. It was a good report to read. I really, on the face, there's a candle at the end of the tunnel. We're doing bloody well. And I just, yeah, I think it's a good position to be in, and I thank you for that, Rob. So, we get a bit of bad press. Can we get this out somehow? We're actually performing well, we're doing a great job.
There's a bit of a mental blockage on the water meters for some people. And I tell you, I used to be in that space, so I sort of understand it, but just being around the sector and developing and understanding more knowledge and information, you soon get to appreciate why we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But that's overall though, yeah.
I mean, from my perspective, you're absolutely right. From this report and the Chief Executive's report, there are some wonderfully positive, good news items. And, you know, Cope Marine and Sugar Lake are two examples of where we've managed to utilise that government funding and do something game-changing for this district economy. So they are good news items.
So, and do I have a mover for the resolution?
Yes, I'll do that.
Moved John, seconded Murray. Any further comment? There be none. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. So we go to the district triennial property revaluation. So
yeah, I'll take the report as read. Probably the highlights here. You know, we've had a nearly 21% increase in property values across the district. With Coromandel being the largest, 31.4% CV increase and 53.7% land value increase.
suddenly you get the money for the Sugar Lake. Sorry,
Is that from council results? Is that since the last?
No, since the last valuation.
3 years.
3 years ago.
Yes, it's very well. I'm totally believable if you watch the house prices like that and stuff.
Traffic at the same time.
Oh, it's actually, yeah, can't say it does us a lot of good, to be honest with you, but.
Yeah, not really.
No, not at all.
Okay, any further questions or comments for Donna and Hayden? There being none, do I have a mover?
One thing I'll just add is today is a day where, in theory, there are some major announcements coming out of Wellington, so I would keep our ears.
Yes, at 9 o'clock.
Out of the press, because Jacinda's probably talking as well. Interested to see what comes out.
I can't imagine what they're going to do.
Unless they're going to waive the RMA and give us the money for infrastructure. I won't hold my breath. Okay, so do I have a mover? Tony, second that. Do I have a seconder for that? Terry, sorry, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Now, I see you're patiently sitting there, so you've got the next one, have you? That's it. Community health on page 1 for Elm Street. I'm not quite sure why we're approving this.
Because it was part of the thing that we wanted to see the design.
Conditional.
To make sure they didn't put up a sky tower or something, to make sure we were comfortable with what they were going to put there. That's
What
what
about the housing?
Sorry? Oh, Jesus,
A three-story building.
Yeah, no, right, and just, I mean, I'm very comfortable with the design that come up with, that was all that we had to be addressed, you're comfortable with, then it's just, that's really.
Okay, no, that's all good. Staff across this and things ticked off. So, do I have a mover?
I'll move it.
Move John, seconded Sally, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes, carried. Right, page 182, this is where the computer did a bit of a belly flop.
Yeah.
And so
We haven't here.
So apologies for the cover report, this is the technical part. So we did fix it. So we did get the cover report on Friday with the new version. So I'm sure you've all got the cover report. So we'll take the report as read, but just stepping through it, we had a reset meeting with the project oversight group, which included Rob and Sandra, to just go through where we are in terms of the spatial plan, and we're seeing that there is a lot of alignment in the long term with the shoreline management plan work. So we wanted to just talk about the process in terms of making sure that we're not doubling up on finding enough evidence for the shoreline management stuff, and also just with the list of options for sort of housing and zoning for Thames. So the recommendation at the moment is that we just needed to get some economic data to help with the evidence for looking at if we are going to look for a plan change. And once that's finished, which we expect should be the next fortnight, we'll be able to come back to council to proceed with a plan change for Thames and the spatial planning work, which is also part of what's happening with the RMA reform work, and be involved with the shoreline management plan work in the long term.
Could I just pass a comment? Sorry.
Yeah, no, you go.
Thank you, through the chair. This particular paper sort of harks back to a meeting that was held probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, possibly, where basically we realised that the spatial planning exercise, as we know, working through the RMA to deliver plan changes is a fraught activity, because you find a new rabbit hole to disappear down every other week. So we do know the importance of spatial planning, not just for Thames and Thames South, but actually for the whole district in coming years. So this is an issue that we've got to deal with district-wide. However, at this point in time, the frustration in that meeting from my perspective was so high that I said, right, separate out all of that rubbish and deal with the spatial planning in a project over here and get the work done to be able to progress a broader spatial plan, but get some land zoned for houses for Thames or Thames South right now. So that was the instruction, and that is where resolution 2, I think, came from in the report. Is this is fast track some change for this side of the peninsula right now, because Thames is disappearing as an economy goes, because we need some land zoned for housing, and that's what the tenor of the conversation was. Make it happen ASAP. And so that was where we've now led. We're allowing the spatial planning to not disappear down rabbit holes, but to do the work that it needs to do to progress a slightly bigger picture. But we are focusing the team on actually making something happen this year, because we've talked about it for long enough.
Absolutely. Yes, Martin, are you moving?
Sorry, Vicky. Are we discussing it or are we moving?
Yeah, we can move it then, discuss it.
I'd like to move it.
Okay. Now you can discuss it.
Calm down. Have we got a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Yeah,
sorry, that's your.
I'll move it and second. Mark, please.
Yeah, we were. Oh, right. So, yeah, I was just a little interested around the differences between the option 2 and 3.
Okay.
Page 184.
Yeah.
And I know you were saying, Rob, about sort of separating out some of the other stuff. So the stuff we're talking about separating out was engaging with other organisations, including central, regional, iwi, and community.
I'm primarily concerned with not letting this process get bogged down with the shoreline management process, which will take years to work its way through. And it's important, don't get me wrong. So from a risk and resilience perspective, we have to run that shoreline management planning process. But in terms of getting some houses built in Thames, we don't need to wait, providing we select the right land to just get on and do some stuff. And that's the difference, is it's don't get bogged down with that very important, lots, time-consuming stuff. Focus on what we can do and make it happen, and then we can come back and deal to the bigger picture, which is necessary right around the district.
So when we make the decision
to go ahead with the plan change, that's when we'll engage with all those different other parties, stakeholders, government, regional council, iwi, everybody else. But we need to pull that trigger first, and then it happens as a consequence of the variation.
But we also just to add to that, we are already engaging with all of those sectors. We're already talking to Waka Kotahi and iwi, and so they're aware of the process and they know that the game is around housing and zoning, spatial planning is the longer term. So it's not like we're just coming in fresh with this as well.
Right. I guess I'm just looking for someone in Thames who might happen to look at this and just go, oh, that's doing the minimum and not doing any engaging or anything. So I guess I'm just a little bit concerned about how this might look.
There's many ways we can go with the Resource Management Act, and basically the spatial planning exercise is, I would shudder to say the gold plated, but it's actually the way we should do spatial planning of any significance.
Yeah.
What we could do under the Resource Management Act is just apply for a non-compliant resource consent and build some houses. So that's the other extreme. What we're actually doing is to try and do the faster end of the spectrum, but with a lot more detail. So that's what we're doing. We're going through the same process, we're talking to the same people, but we're on a fast track to get some houses built somewhere. And then we're dealing with all of the other larger processes that are required around a true spatial plan. So it's not that we're doing the bare minimum, we're actually doing the minimum we can to get some results as soon as we can, and also working on the
I guess, yeah, I mean, while appreciating that you're not just doing the bare minimum, it's just that that's the second, after the word option 2, it says to do minimum. So I'm just more thinking about that, we're not really, and as Lorna says, we're not doing.
Do we need word option 2 in the resolution or not?
I mean,
it's not.
It's not the resolution, but we can put a resolution.
It gives people a bit of an indicator.
Right, so I'm thoroughly in support, and if it was easy, it would have already been done. So we can get all excited that we're doing this fast track, and I can tell you, I've gone grey worrying about it, is that it's not easy. There's not nice bits of land sitting all perfect, waiting for the right buyer to come at the right price. So that's all I'm saying. I totally agree with it, and it is hard.
I've got to agree with you.
I'm in the process. But this actually has to happen. I'm just disappointed that it takes so many years and so much money just to get anywhere. No wonder we've got a housing crisis, that's all I can say. So move Martin, seconded Sally. Any further discussion? There've been none, all those in favour, please say aye. Oh, and by the way, it's got the words option 2 in there somewhere. Carol.
It might be, yeah.
To endorse option 2.
Yeah, well, I don't know, I don't necessarily agree with that, because that's where it says do the minimum. So to me, as it reads, it's more positive.
I didn't signal the change before the resolution was put, so the resolution stands as
right. Yeah.
We'll do next conversation.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Right, now we are on to.
Check
Craig, do you want to have a break for a cup of tea?
Yeah, we've earned one.
Should we just do the chief executive?
So you can all write do the chief executive's report. What about members' reports? Want to do that after a cup of tea?
We've got to wait for.
Yeah.
We are just trying to move, we're trying to get a hold of the submitters to see if they can come in a bit earlier.
Cool.
But thank you.
Did you want, can I just jump ahead a little bit? I'd like to just take, you want to do your members' report now or do it when you get back?
I'm happy, I'll wait.
Pardon?
I don't mind, I don't mind.
Because we'll be finished by the time you get back. So I'd like Tony to have the opportunity to do his members' report.
Right, yeah.
If you wouldn't mind, Tony, and then we'll get Rob's and everybody else's. But Tony has to go, he's got an appointment.
So I didn't submit in writing part of my report.
and that was the outcomes of 2 very active meetings I went to. But some of the discussion we've just been having, from my report, the shoreline management program for me is really starting to get traction now, and there's actually rubber on the road. And I just invite anyone, when they see one of those meetings coming up and they are on Teams, if you've got nothing else on, to dial on and have a listen. So the 2 very interesting things that happened at the last one was a presentation on insurance. And we've seen a to say insurance will drive this thing a fair bit. And I am suggesting in 18 months' time, if you own a house in the line of the coastal inundation, it will probably be uninsurable. So property prices in part are going to be driven by that, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on when we did have that line drawn around, people didn't like, including real estate people and insurance people and groups of people and councils. That is going to happen, and basically if you've got a house similar to that line, you're going to have some issues. So that was very, very interesting, and the woman that presented that was, an exceptional presenter. The other thing is within the NZTA or Kotahi, there's been some major changes in that organisation, and in my terms, basically the old farts are gone and they're thinking from 50 years ago, and there's a lot of young people that are enthusiastic and well qualified by experience taking us down a different track. And we had a presentation from a person there who has been around for a while by the name of David Greer, who, by the way, speaks very highly of our man in Varley, we're very lucky to have him. And so that space now was about resilience. So those things we've spoken about on our roading network, we have to get that paid because they're driven. And they said, don't worry about the road surface, that's not your problem. What your problem is, that it goes through a whole lot of mountains. And when they're on an event, the best pavement you can't drive on because it's full of logs and clay and rocks. So how we get over flooding areas, we talk about the wave river, heavy rain event, can't get over it. And there's no money for a bridge. But these people say, don't worry about that, they just raise the road. So there's work going on, and it's going on inside here now. It's work that Ed is doing, and will come to us with things about the speed around school zones and other areas, flooding areas. He is in that space. So,
and the new Waikato manager?
Yes, very, very good. So he came from Doc to there. So I went down to a meeting on Monday, which was a field trip. Because it was looking at all the roads straight to North Hamilton. It was looking at the container port with the university is, which Tainui Trust. So there's some fantastic things going on in our district at the moment. And when you go and have a look at what that's road is, this is Autobahn standard, where all the roads flow from the middle and all the water court, it's all treated and pumped out into wetlands and stuff. There's some fantastic stuff. You can't see it, you can't drive it yet, but
4 months to go.
so yeah, so that was good. And Terry, you raised the issue of the catchment. So that was good. So it's been a move away. They sort of got rid of catchment boards, and it was taken over by regional council and bureaucrats. They've said the cost of doing it was prohibitive. So they got back into almost what they were. So there's groups of farmers who've got a couple of diggers. They have to do all the same things to the same standard as everyone else, but they get on and do it. So now they can drain something where they're going to drain it. With farmers' eyes that have looked at how to get rid of water and store water for 100 years successfully without any other interference. So things are happening in that space and happening quickly. And so some very good people in that area. So
if it wasn't for the farmers having oversight of what the regional council is doing, they would have wasted a lot more millions than they already have.
Many millions. So this is now just taken down to people looking on the land and saying, right, I'll bring my backhoe down and I'll dig this up. And what I'll do, I'll get rid of some coy carp and do a few other things. But still meeting all the environmental requirements and the biodiversity requirements, etc. So some good things really going on, and That's about it for me.
Awesome, no, I really appreciate the work you're doing there, Tony. Good stuff, and you've now got 2 minutes to go to the appointment.
Yeah, that's good.
So thank you, and we'll include your report during the members' report round for. Thank you. Appreciate it, Murray. Right, we now got Rob's report, great council meeting.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Having spoken about the Chief Executive's report in the previous item this morning, we'll take this item as read. There's a lot of updates in there. The items of absolute significance, clearly, and they have been for quite a while now, are the Three Waters reform and the Resource Management Act reform. You will notice that both reform processes are to be enacted by 2022, so basically prior to the next local government election. So there is not even any time to have any elections, local government, from a local government perspective, before those new pieces of legislation come into force. They are the two biggest changes to local government since 1989, and possibly
bigger than that
in 100 years before that. So they are massive pieces of legislation. I do know that I have been told behind the scenes that everybody, Wellington as well as local government, are really struggling with the pace of these reforms, but there is no brakes on this train. So, yeah, massive. So what I would say is let's stay as informed as we possibly can. What I'm hoping to do, particularly with the Three Waters, is to put some folders of information together for everybody so that we can actually have a round table chat at some point in the next few months with a folder full of information to say, right, this is what we know and this is where it's heading, and provide as much detail as we possibly can in that sort of round table forum. My advice will remain the same, is that we would be crazy to opt out of this process, because that suggestion is being promoted by Wellington that we can choose to opt out. But my professional advice at the moment is well retired anybody that does opt out, unless you're an Auckland or a Christchurch. Anyone other than those two would probably struggle to be able to opt out and meet the deadlines and the financial consequences that meeting all the present legislation would cause.
So my synopsis of the water services bill probably sort of lay it out. There will be an avalanche of costs. My concern is that the local public have no idea, and it is going to be a cost on every single household. Rob, one thing that has been asked is, will the government pay for the infrastructure that they take over from us?
Again, that's a really good question. And basically, there's been no information whatsoever on what the deal is. So that is an avenue of extreme tension. All of the groups that I know of have been trying to have that conversation, but there is no appetite for that conversation at the moment.
So the government knows the value of the asset, they know the debt of the asset, and they know the projected works.
And the difficulty is that there are some local authorities that have zero debt and pretty good infrastructure because they've invested heavily, but they've not borrowed heavily. And they've worked really hard to manage their own costs. How are they going to experience the deal compared to those organisations that have under stress infrastructure plus huge debts in relation to the infrastructure that they have built? It's such a difficult financial model to run that I think that's what's holding Wellington back, is that they are just overwhelmed in the timeframes that we're working to. They're overwhelmed in terms of what could that deal possibly be. But again, we have to keep pushing, and we have to keep pushing through Local Government New Zealand and through the Society of Local Government Managers to make sure that we have that conversation about what's the deal. Because at the moment, we seem to be being pushed down the road of what's the transition going to look like, rather than what's the deal. Because to my mind, the deal comes before the transition.
So can I just make a couple of comments?
I hope this time they do an assessment of the common law of rights and property, which they never did under the original RMA, and so that they should be addressing that oversight, because the abrogation of common law rights is a serious matter, and I don't think they should ignore it this time around. Murray, I like Murray's analogy with the three waters, that the water proposals could very well end up looking pretty much like NZTA, a similar model to NZTA. And if that's the case, you've got to remember that 60% of our district has private supply.
Yeah.
Only 40% is reticulated council supply. So we're going to end up with what? Some sealed roads and some unsealed.
Yeah,
So the cost, whichever way you slice it, is going to be massive. So anyway,
there's one issue that is sort of slightly linked to this, and it's going back to the last statement of intent. There is a piece of work that the LAS are working on now, which I think we've termed the Shifting Sands project. It's identifying what local government, from our perspective, could be tasked with moving forward. One of the issues that is burning my mind at the moment is, you know, I've heard a lot of talk about the fact that we can get into mental health and homelessness and all that sort of stuff. But again, where I would always focus on is that if Wellington is focused on pushing those social services, for want of a better description, to local government, what we need to make sure of local government is retaining an independence from Wellington that is purely local government. Because if we end up in a scenario where recommendations from whatever review is done to suggest this is what local government needs to get into in the future, it should not be funded from Wellington without an independent funding stream for local government itself, because we have to avoid local government becoming a department of Wellington, because that would not lead to good local decision making. So that is a massive debate in itself, in terms of not what do we do, but how do we pay for what we might do, and that will be an incredibly fraught discussion as well. So whilst we always wish for more government funding in the infrastructure space, which to my mind was right and proper, we should have been getting that government assistance in the infrastructure space. To move into a social service or an education space or wherever it is, based on the fact that we know better locally, because 9 times out of 10 we are a lot closer to our communities and we do have a very good idea of what to do. We also need to know that local government will retain independence from Wellington and not be that department.
So do I take from what you were saying that you personally see this as a push from central government to change the emphasis of local government completely?
I'm only launching
that's
how I believe it to be. I mean, I look at local government around the world, and usually it's the UK model that is sort of comes to the fore, and that has social service workers. It has, it has the police.
I was just going to say the same whatever
education. And again, there is logic to that. And from a policy perspective, all I would crave is that we have an early heads up in terms of what is being debated, so that local government can get prepared, not in terms of just the subject matter, but also the funding stream. Because we don't want to get handed both the money and the activity without our own independence as local government, because I think the strength of local government is that independence. It's local government that is the moderator on central government, and it's central government that can be the moderator on local government, and that is how the best way for democracy to work, from my personal opinion.
Nobody likes change, but and I'll go approach this stuff that I don't mind, but bloody hell, I open arms straight on. I mean, can you imagine Sandra as Commissioner of Police in this district?
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I'd say, forget going and buy it. We put that money to better use elsewhere, Murray.
I really can't help thinking these water reforms are going to be a parallel to the electricity reforms of the late 90s, where we're going to have bureaucracy built up, where we had one of the cheapest forms of electricity in the world. Since then, with lack of investment, we've paid huge dividends to governments. We as the consumer have been squeezed, and I can only see it all the wheel going around again.
That's right, and that's the problem with
the national government did that, and whichever the government
doesn't matter. The biggest issue that we have around all this is there's so many questions left unanswered.
From the information I've seen on the water reforms, Originally, when this process was started, the estimates were that it was going to be a $45 billion fix for the three waters to bring them up to modern standards in terms of the standards that are currently being set and will be enforced through the new regulator. Even in the 6 months or so that data exercise has been conducted, the current estimates is it's between 200 to $250 billion in terms of a fix. And rather than taking 30 years to achieve those targets, it could well be 40 years before we achieve those targets. And household bills could be set to increase not threefold, but fourfold in that period of time.
I'll turn it into utility bill.
That's what it has to be.
Yeah, and one of the things about these companies that will be managing the water and looking after it is, yes, like what Murray was saying with when they did the electricity reforms, they're basically saying electricity will be free. And
what was that?
When they did the electricity reforms, well, they were saying it would be, it would be very cheap. It would be very cheap, and as you say, it's just gone through the roof, and I can see exactly the same thing with water. And overseas company will come in because they'll say, well, we need the investment. And you end up with a situation, water in Thames in the UK, the Thames water, it's mostly owned by overseas companies. And you have no choice, there's no accountability. It's
take back down the creek.
So what we're talking about though, as far as I'm concerned, is that, the government's come up with a solution for us because in various spots, it wasn't working for the communities. And we, regardless of, suddenly if there was a revolution in Wellington and all this would stop, we would still be faced with major issues on this peninsula about water. It's not like it's right, and those people are causing us trouble. It's not okay.
None of what I'm saying here would be a complaint that we are doing something about the problem, because if New Zealand wants to elevate standards, and rightly so, standards need to be elevated. So something needs to change.
Yeah.
Wellington has come up with this solution. It has come up with an opt-in, opt-out type of solution because local government asked it to. And the Minister of Local Government, I understand, is now quite trapped by that commitment to make it opt-in, opt-out, because I do believe that there are calls for it to just be mandated, get on with it, and save this agony for everyone. So that is a moving debate at the moment. So from my perspective, again, something needs to change. Huge amounts of money need to be found. The investment horizon is going to be a long time. And household bills are going to increase. And I think those are our absolute givens.
Yeah. And the political environment neglected to keep that asset up to a standard and maintain that standard because of the political impact. Yeah. That's been the tragedy for so many years. That's been the tragedy. We wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't so politically influenced. Yeah. The actual getting the dollars out of the ratepayers to fund the infrastructure. Anyway, so that's what it is.
Back to Rob's report.
I think it's good. Yes,
We've got a couple other points I can just raise through you. The Tikapa Moana Hauraki Golf Forum. I mean, just watching a little of that, there's no mention of that, and that looks like it's going to the government as well. Is that going to influence what's happening in and around the region? It's quite a big part of putting 30% of reserves into the coastline.
Hauraki Golf Forum. So that was moved during the last term.
Yeah.
I think it was the last
term. Yes,
it was under John Mewson. I went to the Hauraki Golf Forum yesterday, but after 2 hours of just presentations, I left because in my mind we're not actually talking about and trying to find ways forward on the key issues around the Gulf. So marine protected areas is one thing, and I agree with the premise that as long as everybody is required to meet the same conditions, that's fine. But of course, there may be parties that get a special advantage. So, but there are other things as well to do with the Gulf, and not the least of which is a huge pollution produced by Auckland affecting the Gulf. Now the kinner is now a pest. It's like the possum. So snapper, a really large snapper, the predator of the kinner along with crayfish. And now the snapper going to mussel farms. So, you know, the one thing that's not there is the empirical data to tell the actual story about the situation as a whole. So we're getting slices to support the rhetoric of the marine protected areas.
There was a very good documentary on that snapper and the killer the other day.
It was,
on TV. Extremely interesting, seeing the devastation of the Gulf.
Round the way, was.
Yeah,
But the kinner doesn't have the natural predators the same, because they're saying that the recreational fishers are overfishing the snapper. Well, are they? Because that's not what I'm hearing from the fishermen. And then, you know, in terms of ability to catch, and so the fact is they haven't done the data on it, and so the snapper are going to the mussel farms. No question about that.
And the other one that I was raised is, it was interesting the other day that the Climate Change Commission, the recommendations they make to the government's going to adopt them, or whatever it is. I wonder how we set with that. We've got no influence into it at all.
No.
Have we put a submission for it?
No. I'm looking now at seeing if there is anybody else that's interested in going to the Harrison farm. I believe that my alternate is Robin.
Right.
But we could nominate to have somebody else just go on that interim. If you wanted to, Terry?
I've been to a few, but yeah, you were doing them, so.
Might do that next time.
So there's a lot of things on the plate at the moment, isn't there? The world's going to change, but we're not going to be like this in 10 years.
Yeah, again, we're keeping abreast of what's going on, but the pace of change is massive. The instruction to our organisation is just focus on what we're doing. Don't get distracted by all of this swirl, because we would get buried if we bought into too much. But again, we are going to be crazy if we consider opting out.
Gary, did you have any questions you wanted to raise?
No, I didn't, thank you, but I've been listening.
Good on you, thank you. Right, I think that pretty much, anybody else got any other questions or matters they want to raise with Rob? So it's good to have the discussion. So think about who might want to go there, who might want to go. People that don't do anything.
I think it's a good report, lots of good stuff.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah. Awesome, thank you very much. Can I have a mover?
I'll move it.
I'll second. Second it moves, Terry, second Sally. No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Well done. Now we have members' reports. Sorry, what was that? And then a cup of tea.
I think Sally wants a cup of tea now.
Murray.
I have very little report. We had one of the long-term plan meetings on Sunday. Just a word of warning, we had one of the people there that recorded it. Next day headed to the local radio station. I think that's a bit of a red thing to do, but that person won't be communicating with me from now on. He's well marked, but no, I think other than that, I think it's gone really well.
I find that sort of behaviour a bit underhand.
Yeah.
I do. He didn't tell anyone, but to be honest, if people don't disclose it, then normal, I think, behaviour would you disclose your reporting. And I expect that.
Yeah. Sarah?
I went to a regional meeting of emergency management. I need to actually, I'll bullet point those points. It's just for you so that I'm not going off the cuff. We didn't discuss it at the minutes, but there's a little bit of air at the moment around our tsunami sirens. There will be a whole public communication plan with us and Thames working together to explain the logistics of why, how, and etc. And my husband broke lumbar vertebra yesterday on Sunday on a safety boat for Wakaama, so we're a family of crocs at the moment.
On a safety boat?
Yeah, so
While in the service of others.
Yes.
Yeah.
So lumbar?
Yeah, so he's broken, yeah. So he's, yeah, anyway, that's personal, so that's fine, Mr. Rodley.
Yeah, so Robin and I went to, drove the Tesla down to Wellington and back to go to the climate change symposium, and we'll be putting a report together, probably just a one page or something. And had a great greenhouse gas reduction workshop, and so a report will also be coming through from that as well. So yeah, positive steps.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate the fact that you and Robin were passionate enough to go down and do that, so it's good. Thank you. Anything else that, can I just remark upon Martin helped out at the Dairy Industry Awards with the setting up of the hall and did an amazing job. And I think Lorna's gone and put it online, a photo of the hall, which I think I text to most of you, or sent to some of you, but it just looked amazing. So thank you, Martin, brilliant job.
It is a good venue, and I think with more marketing and some easy to put up things, it could be a great place. And I don't think there's ever been a wedding there.
No.
It's just like crazy.
You have themed weddings.
Maybe I'll renew my vows to Hillary in the Civic Centre. Over that.
First wedding, and that's a good idea. Okay. It was actually great to have Martin and Peter along there with their wives, and the first entrance, mostly women that won placings, and the first person was a young girl trainee who won the first prize amongst the trainees, and she'd actually been taught by Hillary, Martin's wife. So that was a real bonus. So thank you. Anyway, John.
You've been to a few meetings with just a couple. The meeting on Sunday at Coromandel for the LTTP was Sandra came along. And I actually liked the way it was run. It wasn't particularly well attended, but those who did come along focused on elected members more than staff, which is good. It's where the heat should go. And so I think that's actually a good way forward. It should be done on those sorts of meetings. The other meeting I went to was at Hindi Bay on Saturday on the Marae over there, at Fire. And I only went along because WRC were invited and DOC, and it was regarding the drop of 1080 in the Hindi Bay area. Anyway, that, going into the details, there was a good lesson for WRC and DOC as to the importance of community consultation before you go and do something in small local areas. And it was a good positive meeting, and WRC went away well educated and with a different outlook. So yeah, there's a lesson there for us too, I suppose, as far as consulting community before going in too deep in those areas. So that's about my life.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes, mine's just about dropping meetings too. We had one at Taranui on the Taranui, but Taranui was 22 odd people there, and it was quite well supported. We've got a meeting on the 31st with Brave House pretty on. I'm assuming that, well, I think we'll get a lot more people there, which is what we're all about. And the sirens, of course, are an issue, so I don't have to fix those. And the other one is that land issue, which we'll talk about other times.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
What I'm finding with the LTP is that people that are hot on a topic and don't like what we're doing, they're motivated to submit, whereas people that actually agree with our thread aren't submitting, and that's a challenge when you get a whole flood of we want X and we've got no support for our position.
Yeah.
So I don't know if other people are finding that, but I find it hard to encourage people to submit in the positive. So I'm just finding that. Yeah.
So I've found going around the LTPs, as you appreciate people doing the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 so far, and 10's coming up Thursday along with the beach club. So I'm really enjoying it. Really enjoying it. Love engaging with the community, and I totally agree with Sally.
I need to go, so I'm going to go and, I'm going to truncate that. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Gary, sorry, okay, Tony, Murray, you need to take over. Gary?
Yes. I haven't been able, because I haven't been in Whangamata much because of personal issues in Auckland, but one thing that I have been contacted by people from the area are the concern about 101 Lindsay, and I'm quite, there's a lot of passion about that, and I think we'll just have to wait and see what happens, because there is huge feeling about that. And I also got contacted by the lawyer for the survivors, who is watching with interest what's happening. So I just thought I'd report that.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone, anything else?
I just think the drop in meetings, well, they are sort of supported, they're being very low numbers, so it's a bit disappointing. We haven't had more people at them.
That's because they're all happy.
I know.
Okay, so we'd like to move to receive the meeting reports. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Gary. All in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. The motion is carried. Okay.
Hey, listen, have a look at the news release, regarding the guts is the bright line's been extended out to 10 years, and investment properties, there's no tax relief for interest on your mortgage